In this one, we've got pocket deuces in the big blind, a second European pro is in the game, he raises to 30. There's almost nothing I like more than making big hands against visitors from across the pond, just so they have a little something extra to remember their trip by. We'll be doing everything we can to help this opponent make a lasting memory. I call for 20 more, we're heads up, out of position, the flop comes 8-5 deuce with 2 diamonds, we've got bottom set and an aggressive opponent. I check, the plan's going for the check raise. We're eagerly waiting for a bet, the cutoff provides us with $80, it's more than the size of the pot. The opponent may be drawing very slim or bluffing, we don't want to frighten him off, we could check raise, but since he went with such a massive sizing, we're going to want to raise a lot less frequently than we would if he bet 1/3 pot. I call to disguise the strength of our hand. Then I ask the dealer if he's willing to pair the board. He says that's no problem and puts out the 5 of spades on the turn. It's one of the best cards that we could have gotten. I check with our 3 ducks going the speed limit in a boat. The cutoff is the gift that keeps giving. He goes with another overbet at 280. We've got almost nothing to worry about other than another 5 counterfeiting our full house, or perhaps an overcard if the opponent has a high pair. It's hard to proceed without looking like I'm harboring a monster, but I call again to keep the opponent's bluffs and semi-bluffs in. The pot is getting big, the river is the 4 of diamonds completing the flush draw, some unlikely straights get there as well. We're close to the very top of our range, the goal now is to extract as much money as possible. If I check, the cutoff may give up betting with his bluffs and overpairs. Now that there are 5 low cards on the board, I've called 2 overbets and diamonds have gotten there. I get very tricky and put out a tiny bet of 150. It has the appearance of a blocker bet, as if I'm trying to get to showdown as cheaply as possible with a hand like ace-8 or a weak flush that I'm unsure about, but in reality, I'm trying to induce a bluff raise from the bottom of my opponent's range or a raise for value from the cutoff if he has the ace-high flush. Note, I wouldn't do this if I thought the opponent wasn't a good thinking player, but a lot of people who play for a living hate giving up when they're getting such a good price to call on the river, and if they see what they perceive to be weakness, they'll pounce on it, like my cat Marvin when I drop a piece of turkey. The opponent takes the bait and makes an enormous raise to 2,100. I was not expecting him to make it 14 times the size of my bet. Maybe he has 8s full or another hand that beats us. It's unlucky if that's the case. We got what we wanted to, so I'm sticking to the plan. I snap call for 1950 more. I'm shocked to see that the cutoff has pocket 9s that he turned into a bluff. He actually had the perfect hand to call a bet of 150 with, but I'm guessing he thought he'd win an extremely high percentage of the time with a raise to get me to fold everything that I might have put a blocker bet out there with, including hands that he beats and some hands that he doesn't beat.
Oh, I thought I had to lose, not you.
Nice. We win about a $5,000 pot. The play works out just as I drew it up. Again, I wouldn't have attempted that move on the river if I didn't think the opponent was good enough to understand what I wanted it to look like I was trying to accomplish, if I didn't think that the opponent had the heart to make a big bluff attempt. Our stack climbs to over 7,000, we're up more than 4,000 on the session, and the opponent has a new memory, so everyone kind of walks away with something. We pick up pocket deuces in the cutoff. I raise to 300. When there are only 5 of us at the table, each player has to fight extra hard for pots to avoid getting run over. No one's been putting more effort in than Paul. He calls in the small blind. The under the gun straddler calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes 7-3 deuce rainbow. We've got bottom set on a board that won't typically be great for us. Checks to us. We're not slow playing anything. I bet 300. Guess what Paul does? I'll actually just let him tell you.
Let's make it 13, Brad. I want some of my money back.
Raising when your opponent has a set isn't a strategy that I often recommend to get your money back, but I'm eager to see how it works out for Paul. Under the gun folds. This is the best situation that I've been in all day. I don't want to let Paul have an opportunity to be let off the hook. I call to keep his bluffs in, which he tends to have at a higher than normal frequency for a human. The turn is the king of spades. It's beautiful. There's no new realistic hand that Paul will have that'll have taken the lead against us. He fires for 2,000. There's nothing to be afraid of. I'm enjoying this moment. I call again, hoping the opponent is going to blast away on the river like he has in some other hands. The dealer puts out the 6 of hearts. It's kind of the worst card in the deck, and it's still not that worrisome. Paul waves the white flag.
Alright, check, Brad, I give up.
Damn it, I really didn't want to hear that. I wanted him to go for another overbet. After he says that, it'll be tough to get him to call anything. It clearly sounds like he's weak. I go for the home run and bet 8,000 as if somehow I don't have much. I'm making one last attempt to steal this pot. Surprisingly, Paul doesn't fold right away. He must have something with at least a little showdown value. As he's still thinking about what to do, he lets us know what he's got.
All I have is a 7, Brad. he knows I'm calling things, so I thought we should let it go, right?
If Paul can level himself into calling, we'll turn a session that seemed to be doomed right from the start into a win of 13,000. It'd be a $30,000 swing from the low point. I can see Paul's having a tough time with his decision. He doesn't want to let it go, but after a full minute, he makes the fold. It would have been nice to have gotten paid there. It's hard for me to be bluffing in that spot though. We at least have a solid profit after a grueling session. The very next hand we have pocket deuces in the big blind. The button raises to 100. This is Mark who just beat me. I call. The under the gun straddler is the other UK pro at the table who raised me with king 10 suited when I had bottom set. He 3-bets to 560. This is one of the key differences between higher stakes games and lower stakes. There's a ton more 3-betting pre-flop. Also, we're playing for piles. The button calls. I'm getting a good price to set mine with a hand that should be easy to play post-flop, although I've already made some more complicated than they have to be. I call for 460 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. It comes 10-6-4 with 2 spades. We brick it, and we're going to be done if anyone mouth breathes on it. I check. Luckily, the opponents are both nose breathers and check back. I wouldn't expect either player to check strong hands with multiple opponents and some draws out there. I could be best, or the other 2 players might be afraid that I have a set of 6s or 4s, since clearly smaller pocket pairs are in my range. The turn is the 5 of diamonds, giving me a gutter to the low end of the straight, and it's another card that in my opponent's minds could have given me a set. Despite losing more than I needed to by turning my hand into a bluff right before getting involved here, I go for it again, making it 2,000 as an overbet bluff. I'm by far the most likely person to have a monster given how this has been played. We don't have to sweat too long. Both players fold almost immediately. We may have been bluffing with the best hand. Either way, it feels great to get it through. At the very least, we denied equity from our opponents and avoided having to check fold if someone else decided to take a stab at it. It's double board bomb pot time again. We look down and see pocket deuces in the hijack. The dealer puts out Jack 10-7 rainbow on the first board. That's an ugly one for us. The second board is 8-4 deuce, giving us bottom set. Checks to me. I bet 75. Small blind calls, giving himself an opportunity to lose lots of money on the vlog. Everyone else folds. It's heads up. The first turn is a king. It's going to be tough for me to get anything going on that board. The second turn is a 6. Some weird straights get there. 7-5 is the only new holding that beats me on both boards though, and since I didn't get raised on the flop, I should be ahead on one board at least. The opponent has around 460 in front of him. I have him covered. My plan is to jam and to put the opponent to the test. Maybe I can get him to fold a chop. Something strange happens. The small blind leads for 100. This could actually work out even better, allowing me to get an extra 100 that I wouldn't have gotten if he had checked. I stick with my plan and I rip it.
Can we get like a clarification? What do you have?
The player eventually calls and slides in all of his chips into the middle. In my mind, we're likely going to be splitting it. I turn over the set of deuces. The opponent turns over ace-8. He has a double gutter on the top board and top on the bottom board. It's a really good situation to be in. I'm pre-rolling and at least half of this pot is guaranteed to be coming my way. I just need to fade all the 9s, queens, and aces left in the deck on the top board. We already see the first river and it's a face card. You can probably guess what it is since I run about as bad as possible in double board bomb pots. Just kidding, I run great. It's a king. The second river gives my opponent 2 pair. He was drawing dead there though. We somehow managed to scoop another all-in on a double board bomb pot with almost nothing on one of the runouts. It's turning into quite the session. I'm up about 1,200. I'm not even close to being finished. After that, we pick up deuces under the gun +1, and I open to 15. Cutoff calls. The big blind 3-bets to 80. I call. Cutoff folds. We're heads up. The flop comes 9-8 deuce with 2 spades. We flop bottom set. Hard to imagine the big blind 3-bet with 9s or 8s, so we almost definitely have the best hand. The big blind down bets is 75. This is a draw heavy board, so I prefer to get in as much money now as possible. I raised to 250, hoping that the big blind will jam. Said he flats. The turn is the queen of spades. It's an interesting card because the flush gets there. I'm also losing the pocket queens, which is a likely holding that we could be up against. And I'm losing the jack 10 as well, but that's not as likely. Big blind checks. In hindsight, I should be betting this card. I can certainly get calls from hands like aces and kings, especially if they have a spade. Even a hand like jacks with the jack of spades could potentially call. I'm somewhat scared, so I check. The river is another bad card. It's a jack. There are 4 to the straight out there. The big blind checks. I suspect that I'm still ahead, so I try to go for what has become thin value with bottom set on a scary board. Put 400 out there. The big blind considers it, and he eventually lets his hand go. We win another one that's pretty large. We're on the comeback trail. Here we've got deuces in the small blind. Spraggy, who's an avid Oasis fan, like he really loves them, opens a 20 in the hijack. The button calls. I call. Jeff Boski calls in the big blind. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It's 10-8 deuce with 2 hearts. We have bottom set against a couple of my favorite people in poker, Jeff Boski and Little Gordon Ramsay. I check. Jeff checks. Spraggy loves pain. He bets 55. The button calls. There are lots of draws. I'm not going to slow play this. I raise to 200. Jeff doesn't have anything to stick around with. He folds. Spraggy is a non-believer. He 3-bet rips it in for 864 effective, like some kind of mad villain in Doctor Who. The button folds. I call. I'm playing a huge all-in for this game against one of my buddies, and I have no idea what he has.
We're good.
I like the bet on Brad.
The turn is the queen of spades, so queens and jack 9 are now beating me. The river is the 4 of diamonds. We show Spraggy our hand, and the dude is not happy.
What an insane loser you are, actually. Ace is no good. Look at this real
Things. Oh, this feels so good.
truly pathetic individual. That's put all his money in his one pair.
I check raise and he just rips it.
Does he have any cover? What's he got?
Alright.
It's always bittersweet to beat your buddy in a huge all-in situation. Obviously, I'm happy to win the pot, and I know Spraggy's happy for me to have a lot of his money. Plus, it's captured on video that'll be on YouTube forever. But Marley has left Spraggy here without a car by himself, and it got really uncomfortable when Spraggy told me that he might need to borrow money for a bus ride home. I had to tell him no. He's a really good friend, but he needs to learn some lessons the hard way, like not to get it in with one pair for 200 big blinds and multi-way pots. It'll be for his own good. To make things tougher, I got the sense that he didn't like having to watch me write notes about the hand in my phone, mostly because he tweeted about it. I can definitely understand how that would be annoying. If I just played a hand terribly and got stacked, I wouldn't want there to be any documentation of it either. It's just that I'm trying to make the vlog the best that it can be. I have to provide a lot of details, and sometimes when I'm writing all those details in the hand history, it takes a little while. I even put in hand history keys in my notes. It's a tough one for Spraggy. My advice to him is, you gotta roll with it. Do you know what I mean? Some might say, don't look back in anger. And I don't think that he did.
Thanks, man.
Really nice hand.
In the last hand for this video, we get pocket deuces in the hijack. The player under the gun limps in, under the gun +1 raises to 15. I call, the button calls, and the player under the gun calls. The flop comes king 5 deuce with 2 clubs. We flop bottom set, and we're in a great situation. The opponents check to us, we bet 40. It's slightly more than half the pot. There are multiple opponents. There are some overcards and some draws out there, so there's a good chance someone will be able to call. The under the gun player does call, and the other players fold. The turn is another deuce, not a bad card for us. The player under the gun checks. There are plenty of hands that can call a bet here, so I make it 65 to try and get a call from a king or a flush draw. Unfortunately, he folds, and that was the last interesting hand of the session.